Hello and welcome to Mr. Clark After Dark, everyone. My name is Lucas Clark and I am a certified educator with Alberta Education and the Alberta Teachers Association. All conversations and interactions exchanged is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. In no way does the content discussed intend to be in violation of the a.k.a. Code of Conduct or meant to target any individual student, teacher, or to belittle or demean the profession in any way. If you have something that you would like me to discuss or have a story of your own to share, please reach out at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com. You can also send a direct message to me on Instagram at Mr. Clark After Dark. Hope you enjoy the show, and please do not forget to subscribe. And now, on to the show. Hope you all enjoy. Boom! Hello again, everyone. Here on the second part of the episode with the one and only Mr. Powell. We go into discussing authenticity when teaching about some historical context outside of your actual background, developing some self-esteem, handling your past insecurities in the present, and seeing students going through similar issues that you did when you were in high school, the quote-unquote negative self-story, and how to get students to reframe their perception of self as being not around what other people tell them they are, but who they can actually be. Being genuine with your students, what being regulated actually means, the importance of giving quote-unquote bad kids a fresh chance in your classroom, not blaming others for your problems, and much more. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Really do appreciate it and hope you enjoy the show. Okay, yeah. Well, because I almost think there's I've taken a lot of interest in this myself because, like, throughout high school, I was obviously not the same scenario as you, but extremely insecure. One, thinking I was an idiot, right? Like trying to not knowing what it was to accept yourself for who you are, or that accept that you are deserving of love just for being who you are. Yeah. That was like something that even now I'm like still trying to like grapple with in terms of like you love people based on what they do for you, not because of who they are. Yeah. So trying to just accept yourself in your own skin as someone who can just be is very difficult. Very. And I almost find that the more I've reflected back, because it's one thing to reflect on your past experiences in any career, but it's another to be in a career where you see kids going through exactly what you went through. Like, and not that long ago. Yeah. It's like, it's only been, 9-10 years for us. Like, but looking at them and seeing, oh, like they've developed this negative self-story of themselves. Yes, exactly. Based on what other people have said to them. Yes. And they internalize that and they limit themselves with that. Yeah. And how do you break that ice within your students? Because I'm trying to think of, I almost think because where we are currently teaching is also a very isolated place. And I also grew up here. So I grew up in a very isolated space where it was people only think of life within the confines of where they are. Yeah. And I find, especially here, there's almost very little contact with anywhere else in the world. So they literally just don't see other ways of living and being. So how would you try to shatter the belief and the internalized self-story of your students? I do that in a way where I think to myself, okay, Devon, every day you're bringing the sunshine. That's what you're doing. You're bringing it into the classroom because a lot of them, especially my -2 kids, they're like, oh, sir, I'm -2. Yeah, I hate that. And they label themselves immediately. Yeah. And then I tell them, I don't give a toss. I don't care if you're -2, -1, whatever. Yep. You are one of my students, and I think you're brilliant. I've seen your work. I know what you can do. And I think you are capable of improving. Oh, yeah, 100%. And if they say, oh, sir, you don't actually believe that. And I say it until they believe that I believe. And if you have to remember, like children, students, teenagers, they're not self-regulated. So they need someone who's regulated
to help them understand their thinkings, their emotions, until they're able to do that for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's what saved me as a student, because I finally had a regulated adult look at me and say, "You are worth it."
Wow.
And you cannot be regulated until you love yourself. And there's a lot of unregulated adults walking around.
Yeah, and I find teaching is especially prone to dysregulation because I think there's a lot of careers where, you might get the odd email that pisses you off, but like in teaching, there's almost any moment where one person can become dysregulated and it triggers the rest of the class.
Yeah.
Or someone will say something out of pocket, and then you're trying to navigate. There's a lot of potential for surprises.
Yeah.
In teaching. So I think learning how to become like resilient to that is just going to help you, because it's interesting you say that, because I wanted to talk to you about, have you ever seen, this is kind of cliche as well. I love talking about cliches, clearly. Was like the first year teacher kind of like you start anticipating, it's like disillusionment through October, November, December, and then it's like anticipation and reflection toward the end of the year.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that only applies to first year teachers.
No.
It seems like, I don't know where October went. No idea. I don't know. Like I find you get into a groove where you kind of it becomes a little automatic. But it seems like everyone kind of goes into that dip.
Yeah.
And so, but when everyone goes into that dip, that means you have everyone who's dysregulated now teaching all the dysregulated people. And that's not the best combination in terms of, like, I find that in between point of semesters, and maybe it's different for junior high or like elementary, for you kind of have like full years. But how have you learned to regulate yourself? Like, what are the kind of things that you do to stay level? That's what I really try to do, is just maintain a level.
So within myself, like, it's all, my thinking is all about, okay, even if I'm not feeling the best today, the way I'm feeling about myself should not have an impact on how I interact with others.
Yeah. Like, it's not their fault that I didn't sleep well or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. So if I'm not feeling hot that day, or I'm tired, I say to my class, "Hey, I'm tired."
Yeah. I think being totally upfront about that is, like, you don't need to be this like person behind the mask that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
They like to see the human element, because I think everyone's, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, a lot of teachers, I find, even in my own student experience, don't understand that we can tell. Like, if you think you can, you think you're putting up that mask, but students tell when you're not being genuine, and when you're putting up a front. And even if you're mad, they don't want you to be fake that you're all like suns and daisies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They want to know, okay, whoever is in front of me is a real person.
Yes. And
they want to know that.
Yeah, they're tired. They didn't sleep last night. Their cat did something that woke them up and they didn't sleep well, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I do think that, but again, and then it's like, well, we got to prepare for the standardized test. And it's like, it's such a strange,
it's like,
well, it's a very strange negotiation of like understanding that not every day is going to be the same, and not every day has to be the same, but you're going toward that same test.
Yeah.
That's a weird.
And being regulated doesn't mean you're perfect.
Okay. Interesting. So what do you mean by that? I guess I was kind of.
It doesn't mean you're perfect.
Okay.
It just means that you're comfortable with yourself enough where even if you are having a bad day, you're not jeopardizing someone else's day.
So what does it mean?
So for example, if like I got some bad news the other day and I was not feeling the best, and I do this thing at the start of every class. I say "wagwan," which just means "what's up" in the local dialect, and the students were saying, "Okay, we're doing good," and then one of them said, "Well, sir, we kind of noticed that you're not doing good." You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
And that's a prime example of being regulated but not perfect, in terms of someone else because you've been a certain way with them and you've interacted with them in positively for your entire relationship, student relationship, home relationship, they know how you are when you're good.
Yeah.
So they're able to physically see the physical manifestation of your emotion is always there. So it's tangible.
Yeah.
And you having a bad day doesn't mean that, oh, we're in class today, the teacher looks upset, let's not talk. Like, let's be scared. No, it's more of, okay, they're having a bad day. We want to know why they're having a bad day. We care about.
I think that just shows that you are making connection with your students.
Exactly.
When they can actually have the goal to be like Mr. Powell or Mr. Clark, you don't like, are you okay?
Yeah.
That shows like a reciprocity of caring.
Yeah.
And
because
respect,
when you're dysregulated, the first reaction is to either fight or fly. Like run away or to argue with the teacher.
Yeah.
And one of my professors did this perfectly. His name's Chris. He called it care fronting. So what he did was, if you have a dysregulated student, the first thing they need to know is that you are there for them. So little Johnny gets up and starts yelling in class. You're going to be like, hey, I'm not sure why you're yelling. I want to understand why you're yelling. If you could let me know quietly why you're yelling, that'll be a much better outcome for everyone.
And I almost find, like, when that does happen, like, you have your student it's your student who does it every day. The normal reaction every time is to be like, Johnny, like, sit back down, like, close your mouth and put your head down, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you just sit and you look at them and say, like I'm here for you. Like, I'm here to care and to, like, and like, maybe you shouldn't use the word love, but, like, I don't know, be like, I'm here to show love to you. Like, I'm here to, like, be here for you.
That's why he called it care friend.
Yeah. And then they're like, I mean, the whole class is like, it almost inadvertently makes the kid who acts up like seem like cheesy to the rest of the class. Because now the rest of the class is gonna be like,
at the start of class,
he's gonna don't make Mr. Powell like sound weird. Like, it's kind of gonna work.
It's too gushy right now. I don't want to be
here. I like that care fronting. That's good.
Yeah. So at the start of the semester, you know, everyone wants to test the new teacher. They want to see how many buttons you can push.
Yeah.
But with every interaction, I was just like, okay, I don't understand why you're cursing in class. I mean, I like cursing as much as the next person, but it's not appropriate. Can we not curse in class? And it's all about respect. Like, I respect you. Realize I say that first, because usually a teacher is like, I demand respect. You should respect me. I'm the teacher. But
I don't believe that at all.
I said, I am working every day to earn your respect. And to do that, I want to act appropriately. And I feel like we can do that as a class together. Try to act appropriately.
It's like a norm too, almost.
Yeah. So you're setting a classroom environment of respect and acceptance. It's all about creating that safe space. We learn about it in modules, but to actually enact it, it's every day.
Well, because that's very different from like a very strict environment where it's like, I demand respect, you have to respect me.
Yeah.
Because when you have to respect someone, you don't.
No, you don't want
to. Well, you don't want to. That's the thing. It's like, you might put on your mask of respect, but if there's no like mutual assurance, like, you need that kind of assurance of, if one of us lashes out, the other's going to respond to bring us back down.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of needs to be the relationship a little bit.
Being a teacher is all about building healthy relationships. And I don't know about you, but no healthy relationship starts by someone controlling the other person, being like, oh, you can't talk to this person. You can't talk to that person. You have to sit down. You can't go to the movies tonight. It's all about mutual respect and understanding. If you're building healthy relationships, you have to build that healthy relationship, not just with your partner, but with everyone you interact with.
But I think that almost takes a lot of self-awareness.
It does.
To be able to tone down your reactivity. Because I find when I start to become dysregulated, I'll get like irritated, but I get quiet. I don't really yell in my class. I'll yell to like all right, grade 11s, like let's try and like lock in if the start of the class. I'm trying to get class going. I'll raise my voice a little bit to kind of get them to. But in terms of actually like pointing and yelling at a student, I just don't have it in me. I don't have like an angry. I know we all have an angry side, but I don't take myself seriously when I'm angry. So then I'll start laughing. Like if I ever get mad, I'll like smirk and I'm like, God, and I just can't do it. But then I don't pretend to do it. Right? That's the thing where did toning down your reactivity take some practice? Like, did you kind of notice yourself like as you started teaching more, like it's like a skill that you're kind of improving at? Or is it kind of just like how you are? Because you do seem very
I would say
chill overall.
It's my personality was a foundation for it, for sure.
Yeah.
And you kind of hone it every day as a teacher. But I've always been an observer rather than someone who reacts.
Okay, so what do you mean? How do you enter your classroom as an observer? Like, what do you? Well, that's actually kind of goes into like you're reading the mood of a room. Like you're always kind of seeing how other people are interacting with each other. You're saying, I think people's energy is it's everything.
Yeah.
I find people will be like, oh, like there's no like aura, but you immediately tell.
No, 100%.
Yeah, I think it's silly to think like I've heard there's a thing called like mirror neurons. That it's like like when you get home. So now I've been with my wife now for 7 years. If I'm in a really good mood and she had a bad day, like we'll kind of start to level each other out.
Yeah.
And I'll come down a little bit.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even necessarily need to be through saying anything. It can just be like, oh, hey, babe, like, how's your day? It's like, oh, like this and happened, or like other way around. So we're almost kind of like teetering back and forth, but you kind of have to like, well, one, you play that with other teachers. And that's the part I've really tried to be aware of in terms of there's a lot of negativity in teaching.
100%. I've noticed that the first day I've came into the industry.
Everyone's like, why are you doing this to yourself?
Yeah. I'm like, what do you mean? Why am I'm not voluntarily torturing myself by going to work. This is what I want to be doing. And it seems like there's this constant negativity about the curriculum, the students, like the building, the air we breathe. It's like it's just this constant negativity. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
And if I wasn't who I am, I think I might have dropped into that rabbit hole of, okay, why am I doing this? Oh, this person's a drag. That person's a drag.
I think it takes a lot of, and now, like I haven't had like you and I have had very different experiences like growing up, but it's like in terms of like struggle and identity, but, and I'm not trying to like equate or anything like that, but I did experience like my dad dying at 22. And so I think that forced me to grow up a lot. And when you are forced to grow up quickly, it puts you down a path of becoming more self-aware.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you and I are both tuned into. I think it's something that you would agree something that you're like attuned to it, and that you, as you're moving forward, you become less vulnerable to kind of that negative chatter. But yeah, how have you tried to like deal with or avoid that, or how do you usually respond?
So, you talked about your own experiences, and there's always in everyone's life there's this challenge or this event that puts things into perspective for you, and it depends on who comes out on the other side of this thing that happens, right? So when it comes to the negativity that certain colleagues have or the school may have or the school environment, it doesn't faze me because of the trials I went through in my student experience. With every relationship I build, I go into it where it doesn't really matter what other people say about this thing or person. It's about how I view this thing or person. So there'll be the student where all the teachers are talking bad about the student, or they don't like how the student works. But I'm like, I need to figure it out for myself.
Like, they're just people, man. Like, you can't, because I've said, I try to do as little kind of like digging as I can. If I have a student I've never taught before in like a new class, I don't try to just be like, okay, I don't ask other teachers about certain students.
No, I feel like that would be a mistake.
Yes, because you're putting an image in your mind of who they are before you've actually had the chance to, because you're not letting them, if they have had bad experiences in the past, you're not letting them recover.
Yeah.
Or try to start anew. Because I've even had some teachers discuss with me like, oh, I taught this student in grade 8 and now I have them again in grade 12. But you're viewing them with the same lens, not realizing this is 5 years later.
Different person.
Yeah. Like, they're not even remotely the same person.
And when
anymore.
you do that, it feeds into your unconscious bias.
Yes.
Like, you have this preconception about this person.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to break that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So when you go into a class and you don't know, it's a blank canvas.
Yeah.
Your relationship with someone will be completely different from their relationship with another person because of how they interact with you.
Yeah.
And you can prevent yourself from being that person for them because you have this notion, oh, they're not going to do anything in my class, so why bother?
Why bother?
Yeah.
That's
yeah. So, but you don't have this preconceived notion. So you make an attempt with everyone in your class. And who knows, you might be that teacher for that person.
And the other part that I always, it's a weird thing to say to someone because you can't really falsify it. And that is when you kind of get through, like when you're doing your practicum, when you're in your first year and you're sitting around talking to teachers and they're like, I hate myself, I hate everything, and you're like, I'm actually like, this is not too bad, like it's very busy, but it's like, this is a nice building. Like,
I'm like, I'm digging the school. I like the kids here. I like most of the teachers.
But then they're like, you'll get there one day.
And I'm like,
why would you even say that?
Yeah, exactly. Why would you tell me that?
Why does that, even if that's true, why does this need to be something that you're so actively trying to make sure everyone feels as shitty as you?
If you are in this much turmoil, bro, leave.
Like,
I don't feel like you're helping yourself or your students.
Yeah, but I guess it always comes down to, it's like, well, I wouldn't know what else to do for a living. And now they're kind of been doing this for a long time and you have mortgages to pay. But I almost feel like,
then why not make the most of it?
But all of that stuff is true regardless.
Yeah.
All of that stuff is true. Whether or not your perspective is positive or negative, everything stays the same.
Yeah.
Except that you become healthier, happier. And I think it might come from, because I think through my first couple of years, I've like lowered my expectations of like, in terms of my imposter syndrome leads to perfectionism. And so when you kind of place this expectation of yourself to be perfect all the time, it can be difficult not to place the same expectation on your students.
Yeah.
And that's something that you need to nip in the bud immediately if you are kind of going down that perfectionism lane, because they are not who you were. And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier of that's the way I learned at university. So that's kind of how I taught. And yeah, I don't know. I just find,
I feel like it all comes down to being honest with yourself and with others.
Yeah.
Because if you're not honest with yourself, you start blaming other people. So if you are not the best teacher, but you're not honest about that to try and improve yourself, I feel like teaching, since I've been teaching, I don't want to be the expert or anything. No. I've only been doing it for 3 months. It's all about learning and building on yourself every day.
Yeah.
But if you're not willing to recognize the fact that, okay, I'm not the best and I need to improve, you start looking into other things that need to improve. And that's where you start, oh, this student is not the best, or this admin doesn't support me. Yeah. You start looking for other holes that you can't control.
And then you're like,
then you become miserable.
Maybe it is the building.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
so when you look into yourself, there's always, no one is perfect. There's always something where you can improve.
And everyone should have that attitude.
Yeah. And if you're constantly working on improving yourself, okay, I'm not the best at this. Let me improve there. Yeah. It's not about being a perfectionist. It's about molding yourself into a better version of yourself every day to help support your students, because that's what you're here for, to support people,
and that keeps it fun.
Yeah,
I think if you take the attitude of, okay, now I've been teaching for a couple of years, now I can stay the same.
No,
I think that's strange. Not even from like teaching, and not even necessarily related to a job. Mm-hmm. But if you're not, and I don't want to go down like the rabbit hole of self-help books, but it's like, if you're not constantly reflecting and kind of channeling your self-awareness of, I had a bad conversation, or I didn't like the way that conversation ended yesterday. What did I do wrong? What did I maybe say that was kind of like didn't lead the conversation in a direction I wanted it to go? Like maybe it was them. But maybe it was me. So what energy am I giving off?
You see, if you start by first analyzing yourself, it leads to healthier conversation. Because if you first look at yourself, okay, maybe I could have said this differently. You start to focus less on the person, and your anger for that person lessens. So now you're able to go up to that person and say, hey, I'm not sure about the conversation we had yesterday. I feel like I may have approached it in the wrong way, but I wanted to talk to you about it to see how we can move forward. Yeah. And if you bring that into any relationship.
Yeah. And a lot of times they'll be like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Because sometimes you're kind of playing that back in your head of like, that was
overanalyzing. And then you go to the person and you're like, bro, get over yourself.
You're like, what are you talking about? Like, no, I wasn't even. Yeah. Because again, and another thing it's like, no one really like cares what you're doing in terms of, I like teaching in the sense that
you have bosses, but you're your own boss.
Yeah, like you're kind of doing your own thing. Not saying that your admin doesn't care what you're doing, obviously, but there's a certain degree of autonomy and agency that I do genuinely think exists within education. Now, whether that varies from school to school, I don't know. Our teaching experiences are very similar, you and I, so far, I guess, in terms of where we've been teaching as teachers for our first time here at the same school.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a lot of ways to channel yourself. And what I've started doing recently is like, while I'm reading, I'll start like jotting down like quotes or notes of things I'm kind of actively trying to improve on in myself. And I'll talk to my classes about it. I'm like, what do you guys think about this? I find that's so much more fun than, all right, let's go to page 39 of your textbook and
collaborative learning is the best.
Yeah. It's not work.
What's that?
It's not work.
No,
like it doesn't feel like
you go into your class and we're like, okay, this is the outline of the unit.
Yeah.
How do we want to learn this unit? Let's talk about it. And they're like, sir, what about a lot of the projects I do? It's not my idea. It's their idea. And when it's their idea, they put their all into it. And you can see it reflected in their learning. Talk to your students. Like they're not stupid. They know what they're doing.
Because they're gonna see things differently than you do. And I think that'll probably happen because the courses I'm currently teaching, I've taught a couple times now. But I think the more times you teach a course, it can be easy to get into the, like I've done these projects before, I'll do them again.
Yeah.
Which again, sometimes you're exhausted. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. It's like, okay, I know this project. I know the rubric. I know it hits an outcome. Let's just a couple days, we'll do it. That's fine. I think I would support any teacher in like doing that.
Yeah.
I do it from time to time. I'm not trying to like promote worksheet learning at all. That's not what I'm saying. But I think just putting the curriculum on the board and being like, what do you guys want to do?
Yeah.
And just kind of keeping the conversation open. Because that way you're kind of engaging inquiry project-based learning into standardized curriculum.
Exactly.
You're kind of finding a way to... Because I like the idea of, I had a professor who talked about the curriculum as document versus curriculum as thing. Like something that you can actually interact with, not something that you just follow.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of the teachers I've talked to seem to have gotten like professor syndrome, where I've now taught this for years.
Yeah.
I am the expert, and the expert should be listened to rather than
Professor syndrome.
yeah,
I like that.
rather than okay, this is a topic. I have my knowledge on this topic.
Yeah.
But with your perspectives, this topic can be add a whole other dimension. And that can happen every year with the same topic. We can talk about the sky being red every year and I'll get a different response.
That's true, because you're going to have like 30 different perspectives in your room on the same thing based on the cumulative experience. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you recommend teaching to someone now that you're 2.5 months in? Well, I guess
I would.
What are the challenges to expect?
What are the challenges of teaching?
To expect, like going into it. If I'm someone who's like maybe thinking, oh, I'll go into teaching. Like, what are the challenges that you think they would expect?
Patience, for one. You need to understand that your voice might not be the one that needs to be heard always. So you kind of have to understand that, okay, maybe I should listen. Listening is a skill that needs to be developed for sure.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people overlook that when it comes to teaching because you're just expected to talk at people all day rather than, I feel like you'd enjoy teaching so much more if you listen. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, 100%. Because that kind of fits back into there's going to be an expectation to kind of, because the traditional teacher mold is comfortable. And it's comfortable from a teacher perspective. It's comfortable from a student perspective. It's comfortable from like an admin or a district perspective of like, you are going to be a round peg in a round hole, or a square peg in a square hole.
It's easy to fit in.
You'll fit in. Your students will do their 4 or 5 assignments, their few quizzes, their few tests. All good. But I think rejecting that with as much individual authenticity as possible is the route to being content in the job. That's kind of what I'm seeing so far.
Because if you think about it, if you follow the system word for word, line for line, you're following someone else's perspectives and you will never be comfortable within yourself for that.
And you will become, I think, like physically ill
100%.
with no individual agency in what you're doing.
100%.
Yeah. So I have one more question for you, Mr. Powell. I have I think my favorite quote so far, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. It's education is what remains once we forget everything that we learned in school. What is it that you want your students to take away from their experience with Mr. Powell that they wouldn't get with any other teacher?
The cornerstone of my learning, and my students can attest to this, is context. With everything I teach and do, they need to understand the importance of context. And the reason I have told them this, for you to truly understand someone, you won't truly understand someone until you know where they're from, who their family are. So all the factors that make up your identity that they learn in grade 10, these are the things that are the foundation of most things in life. The World War does not happen without the events that lead up to it.
Yeah.
So without that context, it's just this isolated event that can happen again if you don't understand the context.
Yes.
So for me, for them to connect the dots, that's my beginning and end. Context. Always.
And is that like for like dealing with people, events, or everything?
Everything.
It's like no matter what you're looking at, there's a buildup to whatever it is that you're interacting with. And if you don't understand that, you won't understand what's happening.
If someone is mad at you, they're not just mad at you because you bumped into them while walking. There's something that led to that behavior.
There's things hiding under the rug that need to be exposed.
There's nothing on earth that happens within isolation.
Yeah.
There's always a reaction to something that happened.
All right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
No worries, man. Hey everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Just wanted to say again, if there are any issues with professional conduct and or you would like to share your own story, experience, or have something you would like to contribute to the show, please do not hesitate to reach out at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com or send a direct message on Instagram to @MrClarkAfterDark. Hope you all enjoyed, potentially found something of use, and of course, please do not forget to subscribe. See you guys all next time. Unless you're scared.